We begin with our boy Peter Parker. He says that MJ can A, never know about his feelings for her, and B, can never be a part of his life. What's his reasoning behind this? Well, he's Spider-Man, given a job to do. Presumably, he means the obligation he took up in the first movie, to mitigate crime rates, to stop needless murder, and to personally prevent anyone with a similar level of power to his own from rising up and causing havoc. To be the Spider-Man and reduce the likelihood of people losing their lives, just as his uncle had. Well, that's some pretty strong motivation you've got there, my dude. I'm glad it's derived from something as rock solid as a stoic moral code rather than something exceedingly fickle like retaining the affection of one person. Shortly after almost murdering his boss, Aziz seems exasperated that another disturbance has stopped Peter from arriving on time. As if this has happened multiple times and that this is the last straw, that he shirks the responsibilities of his jobs in order to fight the city's injustice. Peter then has to deliver a pizza within a ludicrously short time span with the threat of unemployment looming. He realizes that he won't make it in time and transforms into Spidey, saving 2 children, proving that he won't turn a blind eye to a heroic deed even under stressful personal circumstances. He then teleports himself into this janitor's closet. It's a funny gag, having all of these handles falling onto him. But surely this receptionist would have seen him into the closet as Spider-Man with a stack of pizzas? How else would the dude slink in here without this cunt seeing him? It's also handy that this janitor's closet happened to have the exact outfit he was wearing earlier inside it, or he'd be fucked. He has no method of transporting these clothes between these 2 places, and his costume is skin tight. This is number 1 on a big ass list of logistics problems. People move from point A to B as if through teleportation, leaving key objects behind or manifesting new ones, ensuring the status quo is maintained with each new scene. You'll see how ridiculous it gets. This corrodes my suspension of disbelief at its foundation. If characters can pop into each scene armed specifically to service the plot with little to no explanation, it makes it difficult for me to become invested in the film's stakes. Peter gets fired and he pleads with Aziz, saying that he needs this job. Oh hey, this right here is the movie setting up that Peter is in dire straits in terms of his finances. This makes enough sense. He's essentially having to work his way through college while renting a room, meaning losing one of his 2 jobs would be a horrible situation to be in, especially since his only family faces their own financial issues. And would you look at that, the very next scene he's shown to be on thin ice in his other job as Spider-Man's personal photographer. His employer, the immortal JJJ, throws Peter's shitty regular photography back at him, with Peter complaining that Spider-Man won't let him take any more photos. So, it was established in the last film that he webs up cameras in certain positions on timers in order to get these glamour shots. Is he unable to take these photos due to his finances? Did he break all of his cameras and thus can't afford new ones? Well, no, in the very next line we hear Peter complaining about the whole city being turned against Spider-Man. Peter does not want to supply the Daily Bugle with more ammunition. This predicament was brought up in the original film by Gobby, who spoke of humanity's fickle nature and of how the public would turn against him at the drop of a hat if given significant reason to. See, that would be an interesting character concept if they ever fucking used it. What evidence do we have for the people's hatred for Spider-Man? Whenever he's in a scene, people are ecstatic to see him, or at the very least treat him with respect. It appears the Daily Bugle has little to no discernible effect on the public's perception of Spider-Man, or we may have had a more nuanced angle to his relinquishing of the superhero mantle later on, with Peter having to fight against negative public rapport rather than something else. He haggles for a $300 check for his backup photo, however the office lady says that it doesn't cover the advance payment he received a couple of weeks ago. Oh boy, he's been fired from one of his 2 income sources and he's in debt with the other one. I could be stressing the severity of Peter's economic situation for some reason, but who knows? We cut to Peter running to catch his lecture, where we witness the beginning of a trend I find very tiresome. This movie dumps on Peter throughout the entire film. It constantly shows shitty things happening to him over and over and over again, sometimes turning the superhuman god into a bumbling idiot in order to accomplish such. It certainly gives the effect of a down-on-his-luck guy who's just trying to find his way in this topsy-turvy world, but my fucking god, this dude would have to have the absolute worst RNG possible. It's the only way this many shirty things could happen to him throughout this movie. I don't think the amount of runtime spent on these events is justified. We just saw him getting fired from one job, threatened to be fired from another, he's behind on his wages, and he's about to be given an ultimatum on his future in university by his college professor. I think I can conclude pretty easily that he's in a rough spot without this constant sadistic barrage of of unfortunate events. Peter quite literally bumps into his professor, who berates him for missing class. You know, I'm not sure about you guys, but if I were working 2 jobs to pay for my college classes, I'd try and find a job that worked in with that schedule, rather than making the thing I was working towards paying for pointless by missing its content. Then again, he probably frequently gets fired from his jobs, considering how often he's late, so we can at least presume that he couldn't find the right one to fit his schedule. Also, one of his jobs has a strict printing deadline, which makes it harder for him to find something that doesn't clash, so it isn't incredibly difficult to believe that he was placed in this position. Peter drives his little scooter back to Aunt May's house, where he is greeted by his aunt and 2 best friends. And by 2 best friends, I mean a girl who constantly tries to manipulate him into confessing his feelings towards her despite being days away from accepting a marriage proposal from her current boyfriend, and Tommy Wiseau, I mean Harry, who sporadically changes between someone who considers Peter family and a very angry dude with a hate boner for Spider-Man of galactic proportions, which he constantly whacks Peter with.
I hit her!
Because, as it just so happens, he has awfully good timing when it comes to the events Spider-Man is involved with. For 2 years. Harry, the goober who he won MJ off in the first film, starts to tell Peter that it is blindingly obvious that she is madly in love with him and that she is waiting for him. Hey, Harry, shouldn't you know that she's already dating a dude? You've been in contact with her during this time period. It's stated later that you've seen her show twice. Sounds like you're good friends and you've probably made a pass at her at least once, right? Why are you saying this again? I could understand if he hated John personally, but we never see those two interact, so I don't know. And even if he didn't know that she was with someone, MJ must be doing a terrible job hiding her googly eyes for Peter, considering they've been in contact for 20 seconds, but we'll cross that bridge when we come. Harry says that he's now head of special projects at Oscorp. In the last 2 years, he's climbed ranks in his father's company to this position. Was it part of Norman's will that he got the job? This fucking dumbass? Well, regardless, Harry is in control of the fusion reaction project and can help Peter meet one of his physics idols, Otto Octavius. Later that night, we see a foreclosure notice for Aunt May's house. She says she's a little behind, but still foists $20 upon Peter, saying that he needs it more than her. She's clearly aware of Peter's lack of funds, despite her own financial position. That's so kind of her. Peter must really be in some deep shit. Mary Jane appears as Peter takes the trash out, which begins yet another trend that annoys me. Peter's inability to communicate like a normal human being. See, he's fine when he's talking to everyone else. He's fine when he's talking to MJ later, but the plot's current goal is to push MJ away from him, so in order for that to happen, he has to act like some kind of root vegetable. I'm not entirely sure why he acts this way. He was incredibly confident when chatting with her in parts of the last film, and is a peppy, quippy, and courageous guy when he's wearing the costume. You would presume that 2 years of fighting crime on the streets of New York would have hardened him up a bit. You can barely make the argument that his demeanor is intentional misdirection due to his promises to keep out of her life. He goes against both of these rules during this movie and still acts like a fucking yam. Out slips a confident, "Oh boy, yeah." But when pressed to confirm what he means by this, he diverts the conversation to asking MJ if she still lives in the area. His lack of commitment bothers her, and despite being in a relationship already, she starts caressing him, wishing him a happy birthday. Still oblivious to her charms and practically blindsided by her, Peter is unable to tell her that he loves her, so MJ drops the fact that she's seeing somebody, as well as that it may be even more than companionship. Oh great, good job. He didn't give you the response you wanted, so your immediate reaction is to turn around and throw the fact that you've been dating someone back into his face just for a reaction, and then prod him when he gives a confused and melancholy response? What a great person you are. Peter's knee-jerk reaction to this is to promise that he'll be at her play tomorrow, to which he responds, "Don't disappoint me." Are you kidding me? You're really gonna do my boy Peter like that? A couple of seconds ago you were flirting with the dude, and now that he's in the palm of your hand, you're setting the standard so that he doesn't disappoint you? You say later that he's one of your oldest friends. Treat him with some respect. My dude's being baited into seeing your shitty play to prove that he still cares for you, and you're saying this as if he's your date. Don't disappoint me? Fuck off. We are shown Peter's new apartment, a rundown shithole owned by a great man. He says that Peter is a month late with his rent. Again, while yoinking the 20 that Aunt May gave him. Peter complains that it is all that he has left for the rest of the week, and there's plenty of evidence for what he's saying being genuine.
Go. Please, I need this job.
You're fired.
Oh, give me another chance. Mr. Jameson, please, isn't there any of these shots you can use? I really need the money.
I don't think this covers the advance I gave you a couple weeks ago.
It's almost like the movie is trying to set up that Peter's finances aren't in the greatest condition. I wonder why I'm beating this point into the ground with unapologetically blunt force. The next day, Peter meets Otto Octavius, who seems incredibly focused on his work and tells Peter to fuck off. Harry grunts disapprovingly and then leaves, and thankfully that grunt carried enough weight to foster a good relationship between the two of them. Hooray! Otto explains his fusion project and seems ecstatic that his machine will provide renewable power for the whole world. He's heard that Peter is brilliant but lazy, and says that brilliance alone isn't enough, as intelligence isn't a privilege, it's a gift, and it should be used for the good of mankind. He also says that the fusion reactor project is his life's work, and that he intimately knows the consequences of even the slightest miscalculation. I point this out because many people think that Otto's leap from confidence in his life's work to complete insanity is somehow justified, despite the fact that almost every single piece of character building the movie gives us in our first meeting constitutes a brilliant scientist solely interested in the benefit of mankind. My man's is excited. He's on the edge of a huge breakthrough for humanity. The only twinge of overconfidence we see is him refuting Peter's doubt that the reaction can be contained. I think if we were shown a scene of him ranting and denying clear evidence that his project was a bust, then what happens next would be justified. As is, the only way that this machine would go out of control is if the person in charge of it suddenly transformed into some other dude. This is Otto Octavius, a brilliant scientist and proponent of mankind's success. Remember this character, because we never see him again. We are treated to Peter on a scooter, bumbling through the streets of New York. In the meantime, MJ's show is set to start in 5 minutes.
Ladies, 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Yes, Peter hasn't even arrived and the show is about to begin. The show that doesn't allow admittance after the doors are closed. Good job, dude. You probably should have left earlier. The fact that this scene sets up so much of the movie's relationship drama is insulting enough considering all of the problems it has, but what makes it worse is that my dude could have been late without any distractions. Which means I have zero sympathy for his situation. I understand that one of his character flaws is that he's late to commitments because of his duties as Spider-Man, but do you think, just for once, he'd take that into consideration? A sudden police chase results in Peter's scooter being completely annihilated. I'm sorry? We're talking about the dude who could sense a fly's wing beats from the other end of a corridor. A guy who, later on in this very film, senses a car seconds before it crushes him to death. And that's even after it's implied that he's lost all of his powers. What is happening here? It's not just that he should have sensed this commotion because he's Spider-Man. A normal fucking person would have heard this, or at the very least have seen the police lights in their wing mirror and pulled to the side. No, clearly the best way to create tension in this scene isn't to write it more convincingly, but to arbitrarily nerf Spider-Man's previously demonstrated attributes. The same guy who made it through this traffic at the start of the movie without falling off his bike and displayed keen awareness of his surroundings is just sitting here like a ninny while this extremely quiet police chase sneaks up on him. Are you having a giggle? Peter escapes via an appropriately Spider-Man-esque backflip and lands on the road, having this exchange with some children.
How'd you do that?
You know, eat your green vegetables.
Cute talk, but wasn't there a queue of cars right behind you ready to convert you into roadkill? Where'd they go? You could fix this by having him flip onto the sidewalk, or have his bike skid off behind him so that the cars moved or stopped to avoid it. This would allow him to stand here without being mowed down by traffic, but fuck it. Broccoli! You would also think that he'd be devastated, or at the very least have a reaction to his bike being crushed, because now he has no way to make it to the play in time outside of becoming Spider-Man. But no. We follow the police chase as one of the cars flies through the air like it's made of nothing but code, with Spider-Man catching it in his web. Oh, awesome. I'm sure he put his mangled scooter and clothes in a nice, safe, easily retrievable area outside of the public eye while he got changed into Spider-Man and swung all the way here. The chase continues and there are some odd pieces of action in here. Spider-Man is a fast-moving target that's difficult to hit, so I can understand the purpose missing their shots here, but this thug somehow misses Spidey while he's right in front of him. This is even after he magically converts his automatic into a pump-action shotgun. But anyway, Spider-Man webs the two goons' guns and they're strung up on the street lamp and scream to be let down. Well, Peter is in quite the predicament now. He has to find another way to get to the show. His scooter is ruined and he's very much on his way to disappointing MJ. I wonder how he's going to get himself out of this one. So Peter drives up to the theater and gets out of his car. Wait, did he just arrive in the car that was involved in the police chase? What the fuck? The cops will be looking to reclaim this car regardless, so how and why would they not have just continued chasing it from here? Does the city not hate Spider-Man? Think he's a menace? Oh, he has his regular clothes on now too? So he either stashed the car somewhere or he drove back the way he came to the alleyway he dumped his scooter in, grabbed his clothes, then drove all the way back here? Okay. Why wouldn't you leave the car with the police as Spider-Man, Grab your clothes and swing back here to get changed so that you can walk through the front door like a normal person instead of stealing someone's vehicle. This is precisely why you should carry a backpack around at all times. What are you doing, Pedro? Aha, speaking of the police, how is this nearby on-duty officer not being contacted via radio to assist in recovering the getaway vehicle? He'd be able to identify this car by description alone. It's black with massive scrape marks down the side of it, not unlike the appearance of a car involved in a dangerous high-speed chase. Like I said, Peter would have to drive back the way he came in order to get his clothes back, but if he did, then he'd most likely come into contact with the police, considering they have a car suspended in midair not far from where his bike was crushed, and if they recognized and chased this vehicle, then there would surely be someone on his tail here, and he'd be involved in a police chase. Where can I see that, movie? But even if he'd seen the police on his way back to grabbing his clothes and they didn't realize that it was a getaway vehicle, then surely his heroic standards would kick in and he'd have to hand the vehicle back over to them. He doesn't know if it's the criminal's vehicle or if they've stolen it, but it sure as fuck isn't his. If they had thought this through and put this event in the film, then at the very least we'd have an interesting moral quandary on our hands. MJ's happiness or his own standards. I'd have loved to have seen that, but the movie just does this. He then leaves his car outside the theater and doesn't care that it will be towed.
You park there, I'm towing it.
Whatever.
Mate, you don't know where these criminals have been, what they've done, or what evidence may be inside this vehicle that could lead to the potential solving of a crime, and you're actively making it more difficult to track down by letting it get towed. You nut job. We then see instance number 346 of Peter Parker getting shat on. This usher tells Peter to lace up his shoe and straighten his tie in order to meet the dress standards for admittance, and then says, "Lol, you can't come in, go fuck yourself." I love the power of editing. Peter isn't getting into this theater, and he just told the officer outside to suck a dick. This policeman would accost him as soon as he left the place in order to get some details and ID from him, as well as question him as to why the fuck his vehicle looked like it had been involved in a high-speed chase, and why it was full of spent rounds and semen. You can see him pulling out his notepad to write Peter a ticket here. I'm pretty sure this mofo doesn't have anything other than a motorcycle license. All it would take is a couple of basic questions and your Peter is done. But hey, who cares if the entire plot is one walkie-talkie call away from falling apart at the seams? Who cares if Peter should be incarcerated for driving this thing? His only alibi is that he was a masked vigilante also involved in the same situation. Nice! Ah, shit, where was I? Peter sees the love of his life emerge from the theater and he stands there like a stunned emu instead of walking up and telling her that he was almost mauled to death by a car. You know, a legitimate excuse that anyone would accept. But nah, he just stays here and listens in on a conversation, hearing all of it clearly over busy New York street traffic. I'm glad his ability to hear things is so consistent or I'd be pissed. He sees another police chase in action and his instincts kick in once again, ripping his clothes open and revealing his suit. However, when he attempts to catch up to the crime in progress, his powers spontaneously stop working. Huh, that's interesting. You'd think if the catalyst for this was him disappointing MJ and her kissing another guy, then his powers would be inactive from the moment that he stripped off. Or maybe he was considering his feelings and they got to him at this very moment? Is his psyche so simplistic that he thinks it's Spider-Man's fault that he can't get any coochie and thus he subconsciously doesn't want to play hero anymore? Yes, it actually is. Also interesting, his webs fail him, but not his super strength, vision, or any other powers. Just the webs. I'm glad he didn't lose anything else here or he'd be dead. I'm so happy that his powers work this way, despite the fact that to gain them in the first place, his genetic code was irrevocably altered. What, did he turn his genes off for half an hour? What is this, fucking Gemini man? He's forced to take an elevator down to ground level as Spider-Man, which is a nice touch. They put a lot of care into how people move from place to place if they think they can get a laugh out of it. It's just a shame that this is the only time they do care. It's also horrendously unfunny.
And I just want to say that I think the image you have is fantastic. It's really put together. The costume, this thing, I mean, it's really put together. It's great.
And they make it even longer in the extended cut.
With a couple ideas for you, just what my company would do. Let's see what I...
Fucking end me. We then cut to Peter in his regular clothes, dragging his crushed bike while a wall of disapproving MJ stares into his soul. Who the fuck is in charge of putting up advertisements around here? Did you actually use every single poster you had on one wall? Seriously though, he walked back through the city streets to this alleyway as Spider-Man to pick up the manky clothes that he threw onto the wet ground. He put them on, then walked all the way back to his bike, which I guess lay in the middle of New York traffic for a decent couple of hours before he came back for it. Well, that is unless he hid it away when he went back to grab his clothes in the fucking getaway vehicle. I'm sorry, that still bothers me. He puts some change into a payphone to speak with MJ and explains his situation to her answer phone in the least efficient manner possible.
There was this obnoxious usher.
Somebody has to talk to that usher, MJ.
I'm not sure what he's doing here, or why he didn't collect his thoughts before talking to her, but again, this movie has decided that he is an idiot in this scene, and I am powerless to stop it. After he hangs up, he speaks his true feelings into the dead phone, of how he can't be with her due to the danger it poses, and who he really is. Of course, this conversation never makes its way to MJ, and he only gains this level of confidence and coherency when his actions cannot affect the ridiculous, disappointing MJ plotline. Points for inconsistency? We're introduced to Otto's fusion reactor, and we get the first look at the robotic arms he states were programmed and engineered for the express purpose of creating successful fusion. Yep, that's what they were programmed for. Hey guys, he just created a lightweight, incredibly durable material that can withstand the heat and magnetic field of a small sun, then forged it into arms that are directly controlled by his brain. That's actually really impressive. Damn. No one? This dude's just invented a locomotion method for anyone who suffered paralysis through a spinal injury, and everyone just brushes over it like it's nothing. Oh, and the sophisticated AI they contain? Not a big deal, apparently. One of the audience members asks, if the AI in the arms is so advanced, then why isn't it a threat to his own brain? He reveals that he has created an inhibitor chip that prevents them from going rogue, protecting his higher brain functions. He controls the arms instead of them controlling him. Cool, interesting concept, however, why exactly do these things require sentient level artificial intelligence in the first place? I can understand that they'd need a chip that translated his neural impulses into commands for the arms, but what exactly do you gain by giving these things sentience? Giving them basic parameters in order to make the procedure safer, like pushing in these little flares, makes sense, but full-blown AI? But it's fine. Despite it feeling silly, I can't fully criticize it considering we don't have an analogous reaction in our reality. I can suspend my disbelief. The arms need a brain for whatever reason. The reactor, however, is another story. You knew this thing could kick off massive amounts of heat and magnetism, and surely your calculations for the slightest error would include a possible out-of-control situation, yet you're holding this demonstration in an apartment building with a crowd of people and no safety contingencies instead of some facility deep underground. Again, a very strange decision for someone who was shown to be pretty reasonable the first time we met him. Who is this guy exactly? The machine starts, Peter realizes some shit's about to go down, and he runs off. He lets this potentially deadly situation run unchecked while he goes and puts his pajamas on. A machine similar to this is stated by Peter to have the potential to kill half of New York near the film's conclusion, yet he's putting his secret identity over the safety of everyone in this room. Peter, you complete bonobo. In the last movie, he stopped people from being murdered without putting his costume on. Is pulling out the cables with his webs really that different? I guess writing is hard. You want Harry to flap, so he'd see Peter with webs coming at him. There's clearly no other possible way to write this scene. We are now in a horrific situation because Otto hasn't shut down the machine, which has gone haywire. Spider-Man attempts to stop Otto's reaction, and by attempts I mean jumps up to the ceiling above Otto, clings there as he announces his presence, and then proceeds to get whacked by an arm as he tries to power the machine down instead of webbing or grabbing the power plugs immediately. Why exactly did you do that, Peter? Yes, the guy who hasn't shown a single streak of insanity is now letting his life's work go down the drain for no freaking reason. He could easily just shut it off. He still fucking can. But he not only doesn't use the massive powerful arms on his back to pull the plug, he actively prevents Spider-Man from powering it down. Why exactly is he acting this way? It's the difference between him potentially getting another shot at this or losing all of his credentials as well as the support of Oscorp, which, as we've already been shown, is the only reason this project is possible.
But Oscorp pays the bills, so there's only 25 pounds of it on the whole planet. I'd like to thank Harry Osborn and Oscorp Industries for providing it.
Happy to pay the bills, Otto.
I'm glad he's such a consistent, intelligent, and well-written character with easily discernible motives and not a spastic. One line of dialogue in which he refutes Peter's concern as to the reaction's safety is not tantamount to this level of irrational fuck-uppery. How can he see this, hear his wife screaming for him to stop, and refuse to cooperate with the person who made this machine possible in the first place while continuing this idiocy? Maybe, just maybe, if there was enough pressure put on Otto to make him act irrationally, and it was shown that he needed to make this work by threat of death, or unemployment, or needed the money for a preventable disease. Or if the inhibitor chip broke halfway through this reaction leading to the AI taking over, his actions could make sense. But I don't think this is the case. What we're looking at here isn't the arrogance of one man. What we are looking at here is a completely different character.
Keep calm. It's only a spike. It will stabilize. It's under control. What are you doing? Pulling the plug. No!
Intelligence is not a privilege, it's a gift. And you use it for the good of mankind.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was dialogue from Otto pre-20 minutes. Could you tell the difference? Spidey swings in and saves Harry, who scowls that this changes nothing. Oh, okay Harry, let me just take Spider-Man out here and see what changes. Again, I think it's kind of odd that he held this demonstration here. Seems like kind of a weird decision considering they knew this ornate window was made out of magnetic glass, but hey, gotta kill Rosie somehow, so let's do it in the stupidest way possible. Spider-Man pulls the plug and Otto is administered a massive shock as a solar flare strikes his back. I'm sure this normal-ass dude will be fine with thousands of megawatts of power coursing through his body. But what's this? The inhibitor chip has been destroyed. Oh dear, you'd think you'd make this chip using electrical components that could withstand the same current as the ARM's AI circuitry, because they certainly survived this event. In fact, this thing should be far more durable considering how important it is, but well, it is what it is. Outside, we see Harry throwing shade on my boy Pedro.
He saved your life, sir.
He humiliated me by touching me.
Yeah! Yeah!
He asks in a perplexed tone what Spider-Man was doing there anyway.
What was he doing here anyway?
Don't you think it's a coincidence that Peter Parker ran off and Spider-Man appeared within moments of each other? In one of thousands of buildings on a specific floor at a specific time during a specific function that's probably invite only? Are you ever going to ask him about this? No? You're not going to do any digging on one of the most comprehensive leads you've had all movie, despite the fact that you maniacally sift through all of the information you have on him later, and every scene you're in turns into a rant fest about Spider-Man. And he's right behind you?
Oh wow, that was excellent.
He says that he is ruined, that all he has left is Spider-Man. I get that Reactor failed, but guess who now owns the blueprints to these mechanical arms controllable by the power of thought? Those have to be worth a fucking mint. That, alongside the composition of the incredibly durable lightweight material they're made out of, these things alone are worth a Nobel Prize. You also have all of his research and the blueprints required for a nearly functional fusion reactor, which you could sell to an interested party, like maybe the US government, who look like they're interested in making their own reactor? In the grand scheme of things, your investment in Otto should pay dividends, especially since you have a massive chunk of the material needed for this reaction to potentially sell. But I can at least empathize with the sentiments. He expects more than just money, he expects superstardom so he can make daddy proud. So his reaction is understandable at the very least. We cut to Otto, unconscious on the operating table. A surgeon explains that molten metal penetrated the roof of his spinal column and his lamina, effectively fusing the middle third of his back together. So I ask, how does this impact his movement for the rest of the movie? It doesn't. Does he ever look vaguely uncomfortable, hunched or in pain while walking around? No. Well, okay then. It's also pretty miraculous that the molten metal that bisected his spinal column didn't damage any of the nanowires he was controlling his arms using, or anything else required for moving around. Speaking of which, why is there molten metal in his back at all when he specifically stated that the arms were made out of a material that was immune to heat?
They are impervious to heat and magnetism.
Or maybe the solar flare heated the material in excess of what it was designed to withstand? But didn't he say they were impervious to heat and magnetism?
They are impervious to heat and magnetism.
Unless he constructed the back of his harness from a different material? For some reason, despite it looking identical. Maybe he only meant the arms themselves. Then we're back to the different metal argument. This is the scene where the robot arms go crazy and kill or incapacitate everyone in the room. I do enjoy the way it's shot, it adds a lot of flair to this part of the movie, but it does feel slightly over the top at points. Bravo, robot arms. I'm glad your programming can extrapolate protocols for controlling a flare on a miniature sun to brutally murdering these people in the most horrific method possible. Ain't that a kick in the head? I'm also baffled that absolutely no one came into this operating room at any point during this rampage and alerted the police. It's not like there were extremely loud banging, smashing, and screaming sounds. I get that this is probably a graveyard shift, but a receptionist? Janitor? Dinosaur? I'm also not sure why these doctors' deaths were expressly required.
These 4 actuators were developed and programmed for the sole purpose of creating successful fusion.
The purpose of these arms is to create successful fusion, and their being removed from Otto makes their goal impossible, so resistance is understandable. However, the reaction is to murder everyone there? You seriously program these things without a do not harm humans rule? Neither of you read frickin' iRobot? Killing the doctors is a surefire way to stop them from removing the arms, but you know what else is? Breaking all of their equipment. Pushing their arms away from the harness, giving them a quick bonk on the head. Any other non-lethal method. But no, they don't stop until everyone in the room is silenced, which makes me even more baffled as to the programming of these things. Why would they expressly require deaths if they prevented their removal? Their priority at this stage should be moving Otto somewhere safe rather than making him into a murderer, but it appears the arms are more A than I. Otto wakes up, seeing the carnage the arms have wrought, and screams no. Is this perhaps because he has a conscience and he values human life? Or is he screaming no at his own predicament, the fact that these arms are still attached to him and that they have caused unimaginable suffering? I have no clue because his arms flip a taxi, most likely killing someone, and he gives negative fucks, so... Otto then ends up near a dilapidated dockside building after presumably going on a murderous rampage. It becomes his new base of operations and the site of his bigger and betterer fusion reactor. Yeah, the rundown building made of steel is where the giant magnet machine is going to go. Well, at the very least he's consistent with where he puts these things. Both places are equally idiotic. Either that or he's incredibly confident that this machine will work first time, as an insanely powerful magnetic pull hopefully isn't an intended function of this machine, but even so, this guy should probably eliminate it as a possibility. It's not like he can't go somewhere else. He moves through the city for the entire movie's duration with impunity. You think he'd just choose a spot that's less prone to the effects of magnetism. What's actually kind of amazing is that no one spotted you or followed you here, and that police car you murdered was the only one in the city at the time. Thank fuck, or else they'd know exactly where your base of operations was, and that would kill the movie. Yay! We have another scene with Jameson. It's charming and hilarious as usual and contains one of the most legendary moments of the entire trilogy.
But could you pay me in advance?
I fucking love this guy. Thankfully for Peter, he is contracted as a photographer for the up-and-coming high society ball. Ah, still struggling with your finances, are we, Peter? I'm sure we'll see the effects of that at some point, right? No. Then JJJ waves the scene out of existence. Motherfucker is so powerful he can just end the scene with a hand motion. What a bamf. Octoman is back on the dock and we see the first instance of the arms taking over his conscious mind. This is also the scene where Otto becomes aware that the inhibitor chip is broken, despite the fact he woke up to this earlier. The AI's primary directive convinces him to rebuild the fusion reactor, but bigger and stronger than ever. They attempt to coerce him into stealing money to fuel his project, but his morality still remains and he states that he is not a criminal. The arms persuade him into believing that the real crime would be to leave this project unfinished. And just like that, bam, he's evil. He has turned into a goblin person who yoinks old woman. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more back and forth between him and the arms, with him slowly falling prey to their influence, rather than a switch being flipped, but This is a great introduction to him being influenced by the arms, but there isn't any other instance of this until the ending. Moving forward, he's just villain archetype number 46. He feels kind of like the evil side of Gobby without the sane side to balance it out. It annoys me as I think him struggling with what he's becoming would feel far more nuanced and interesting. We see by the end that the AI doesn't have full control, and he can resist the influence if he's focused enough on his goal despite the destruction of the chip, even taking actions against the arm's programming entirely, so I think more resistance to their will would have been a welcome change. Peter and Aunt May travel to the bank to discuss the foreclosure notice that she has received and attempt to sort out her finances. During this interview, Doc Ock auspiciously appears. Wow, what are the odds of that? I get that discussing something as financially heavy as a house foreclosure would require a higher profile bank, and Ock's more likely to gather the funds he needs at such a bank. But they're here on the very same day, at the very same time, in a city of 8 million people and a bunch of banks. What a coinkydink. This fridge magnet manages to walk all of the way in here whilst obscuring his identity with a hat, glasses and trench coat, and thankfully the bank's security fails to arrange the sourcing of a single fuck. They just let the dodgiest possible person waltz in here and take a crack at the very visible vault door. Alright, put the vault here, but God forbid if you want a toaster. They keep these out back, where they're safe. Doc Ock pulls a square of fabric about the size of a pizza box off of his coat and the arms just pop out. Okay. I'm glad he's able to hide them like this because it somehow allowed him to get from here to wherever he stole this hat, glasses, pants, and a trench coat with some kind of pocket dimension in it. All while wearing nothing but a fucking blanket, which somehow aroused no suspicion in the slightest from the police, traffic, or pedestrians. How could he possibly do this, you ask? Well, because the movie expects you to ignore how fucky the logistics are for this writing to make sense. How did Peter get to the theater? He stole some criminal's vehicle. How did he get out of here without the police questioning him about said battered, scratched up vehicle? Well, he warped across the street. How did Doc Ock get from the hospital to this building without anyone following him, tracking his path of destruction, or noticing the building he entered? Well, he walked. I've heard arguments. Yes, I've heard arguments. This shit gets tiring. of people stating that he completely hid the arms under his trench coat to the point of them being invisible. They'll use facts like, we know the arms can extend and contract, and then somehow transmute them into shit like, surely they could squeeze up and be hidden under his trench coat, right? I'd be convinced if we ever saw the arms contract to be near invisible, like a certain better movie, or maybe saw a shot of the dude with the arms under his coat, which would be ridiculous. But as far as I'm concerned, there's no fucking way a pizza box size of trench coat is hiding these things. It'd do good to hide the goddamn harness, let alone these arms. These shits pop out at a 90-degree angle from his back. Peter just runs off, you know, it's his thing, leaving potential victims, and in this case stealable assets, in a room with science squid. He does this instead of shifting Aunt May outside and away from the maniac that almost nuked her with a vault door. He just runs off so he can get changed into his jammies. Because if he did move her outside, she'd wonder why he was running back into the building, or off into a random alleyway. Then the movie would have to come up with some sort of excuse as to what was going on, but that would require extra work on the script, and you know they don't like that. Ock shanks the vault and 3 security guards appear. Maybe if they were doing their jobs in the first place, they would have performed a security check and this dude would have been refused entry. But that would have caused a commotion at the front door rather than at the vault, leading to a different turn of events, which would require extra work on the script. So it's better if we just drag these guys into a separate reality for 30 seconds, then have them show up when a dude with 4 massive robotic arms starts punching holes in your vault door. Ock grabs a bunch of money and starts trying to yoink it, but Spidey swings in. He evades the avaricious onslaught. Did I really write that? Throwing a bag of gold coins back at him. Well, that's awesome. I guess the fact that his spine is fused together by twisted metal doesn't mean a thing to this man. Disregarding even that, there's something very strange happening in the scene. This is a normal-ass dude, no? Even somewhat of a chub, yes? And he's being wailed on by Spider-Man, the guy who stops a runaway train with the strength of his arms in this very movie. The guy who killed a man with a single punch. Sure, he could be pulling his punches, but you think his goal would be to knock Ock unconscious, and that he'd punch him progressively harder until this goal was accomplished. And it's not even like you can use the excuse that this power is inconsistent because it's new to him. There's absolutely no way Spidey wouldn't have figured out how to accurately control his strength so he'd stop punching people to death. Plus, this guy isn't even a hardened criminal. He's a pudgy scientist. Guy should go down like a sack of potatoes, no question. The arms could even continue to fight Spidey while Ock is unconscious, then scuttle off to get his limp body out of harm's way, as they've shown to move independently before. But instead of the arms being incredibly threatening and defensive, fending off blows from Spidey that could easily knock out or kill Ock, the script just lazily bestows Doc Ock with the same durability as Gobby from the last movie. If the movie had some evidence for the arms shutting off pain receptors or imbuing him with greater mental resilience through the neural link, then I could give this a pass, but as is? No. These arms don't do that. And this guy's face should still look like a plum regardless. Maybe he stole some Juggernog with that hat and coat? Doesn't seem too effective against umbrella handles though. Not even his super durable glasses could stand up to that fucking umbrella. This umbrella contains more energy than the collective sum of Spider-Man's punches throughout this entire scene, and may as well be Mjolnir at this stage. Spidey's powers fail? Why here? Why now? Well, dear viewer, it's because it makes the scene more intense. It's just his webs too. Thankfully his fingers can still hold onto the wall or he would have toppled off it quick smart. And thankfully his super strength is still intact too, because it would have been a real shame if he was severely injured by this fall or had his head crushed like a melon. His powers also come back like a second later. So what exactly is going on here? Is there a viable explanation for this particular instance of his powers vanishing? No, there is not. Lazy writing, my friends. Let me explain. There are 2 other points at which his powers disappear, and they're both directly connected to his relationship with MJ, both instances of which involve them fading for a decent chunk of time. In the first instance, he has to use an elevator to get to street level, and in the second they fail him for presumably the same amount of time, if not longer. Here, there is no connection to MJ, and no direct connection to anything at all that could dampen his powers for any reason. And they only flicker off for a second or 2, just to add tension, nothing else. This sticks out among the other instances and actively breaks continuity with regards to his powers switching off, making the already nebulous parameters surrounding their absence even harder to pin down. Like I said, lazy writing. Don't creatively increase the stakes, just nerf Spider-Man and buff his opponent, and the stakes will come. And they came. The police then attempt to stop Ock as he leaves the building, and give the order not to move or they'll shoot. He then moves, taking a hostage. What do? Well, they wait for him to take his hostage and then lower their guns. Okay, Otto does take the hostage pretty quickly and with no warning, so it's not a big deal, but it is notable that if he were shot in the head, he would die. There is no reason or evidence for us to believe that the arms could move fast enough to stop a bullet in any scene that he's in, either through conscious choice or reflex. His battles with Spider-Man would be completely different if this were the case. Yes, it is coincidental that May is the one who snagged out of everyone here, but if he was looking for someone vulnerable to exploit Spider-Man's moral compunction to protect New York's citizens, then from the crowd she's not a bad choice. Otto scales the building with Aunt May and they continue brawling. He makes use of all of his available weaponry in order to eliminate the greatest threat to the fusion project, the completion of which is the main directive of the arms and by extension Otto. After a decent enough brawl, Ock goads Spidey into slingshotting towards him and extracts a sword with which to impale him from one of the arms? Why does he have a fucking sword? Not some kind of scientific tool or implement that you could logically attribute to being necessary in controlling this reaction? No. It's a big fuck-off sword. I could stretch my suspension of disbelief to presume that the sword has some use during the fusion reaction, such as poking the center of the sun to control the tritium core. Not that the movie gives this explanation, or that this tool is ever shown before this point, but its existence is fine. Its usage in controlling a reaction we don't have in our world is explainable by the fact that we don't exactly know what's required to control it, just in the same way that the tritium can do whatever it wants, as it's a fictional material. Like creating a tiny sun that doesn't melt everyone in the room's skin off, and magnetizing glass. As long as it's consistent, it's fine, but there are bigger problems at work here. How long has he had this? Did he always have this in his arm? Why wouldn't he have used it earlier? He could have used it many times prior to this. It's been established already that in this state of mind he has very little regard for human life. Also established, Spider-Man is the greatest threat to the fusion project, from both the arms and his perspective.
Getting on my nerves?
I have a knack for that.
Not anymore.
You've stuck your webs in my business for the last time.
He even has to assert dominance over them later in the movie to stop them from murdering the dude. Yet at the same time, they're both content with ineffectually bludgeoning him rather than shanking his spidery ass. You want to know something funny? A newspaper article later on in the film depicts him with the sword out after the bank heist incident, while he's in patient robes. Is knowing what the target of a manhunt looks like not helpful information? You'd think they'd want to use a more accurate portrait considering they last saw him looking like this. But the fact that the sword is out in this artist rendition is what floors me. He had to consciously be using it during this initial escape attempt, but just forgot he had it the whole time. That also means that there was eyewitness evidence of what the guy looked like upon making his way to this building in order for the sketch to have a reference, which makes the idea that no one would know that he was here, or at the very least in this area, even more dubious. The further away from the hospital he travels, the more eyewitness testimony there could be against him, and more likely he was tracked here. Or the closer to the hospital this building is, the more likely it would have been searched first as a potential lair. He seems fucked either way. Well, anyway, Aunt May clobbers him, resulting in her being dropped. The height of the building seems a little fucky considering the falls we saw prior to this, but this is more a slight nitpick than anything substantial. She's caught by Spidey and put safely back on the ground. Doc Ock gets fired upon by the cops and is unharmed. He's quite far up the building, so it's not a big deal that they missed the dude, he's just lucky to be missed so many times. But that's not the problem with how this scene ends. And there are a lot of problems with how this scene ends. Firstly, why aren't the police pursuing him? The next time we see him, he's back in his lair. Not a single cop was called in to help catch the single bank robber committing a crime in broad daylight. He's got 4 big-ass arms. He's not exactly the stealthiest dude. Call in a police helicopter to keep track of him and put the city on high alert so that if he's been seen by anyone, he's fucked. I don't know how he's supposed to hide these arms now that he's ripped open the pocket dimension. I've heard arguments that he could have travelled via the sewer system. It's not a flawless method of travel as they could see him entering and exiting, but it's better than him walking at street level. Not that this method is ever shown or referenced in the movie. As of now, someone should be trying to stop this man. Spidey puts Aunt May down, has a humorous chat with her, and then swings off in hot pursuit of the cretinous cephalopod. Oh, wait, dude, you're going the wrong way. Hey, wait a minute, where the fuck are you going, Spidey? The party is at 8 o'clock. This can't be later than mid-afternoon. I think you have enough time to stop the dude who attempted to murder your only family left on this planet, and who is currently making it away with 2 bags of money. What reason could he possibly have for abandoning his quarry? Was he afraid that his powers would suddenly null if he tried chasing Doc Ock? That didn't seem to concern him earlier on. Why would it be any different here? His powers have no reason to deactivate, and it's not like we see him feeling his powers fading and swinging away to safety. He just fucks off and the scene ends. Maybe he didn't want to worry Aunt May with his continued disappearance and left to change back into his normal clothes to pop back in as Peter again. But Peter's clothes are in or very close to the bank, which is likely swarming with police at every point after this. Good luck getting your clothes back dressed like this, Peter. But he does. He does. I like how he just leaves, especially considering his characterization throughout the entire film is geared towards him stopping crime even if it's detrimental to his personal life or finances. But it's the main villain, so he has to get away because there's an hour left in the movie. Does Aunt May ever question or comment on the fact that Peter A. ran off during the initial conflict, B. disappeared for the entire duration of said conflict, C. didn't reappear after the conflict and left her in the street? No, she does not. And just look at the malice and disgust the public displays towards Spider-Man. It's just as Peter said, and the godlike JJJ proclaimed. The whole city has turned against Spider-Man. And yeah, I gotcha. They've just been saved from a technological terror. I'd be happy to. However, could you show us a single instance of the public's disdain for Spider-Man so his excuse at the start of the movie doesn't sound so hollow? Just have someone throw a tomato at him, or literally anything. You could shift the runtime that you dedicated to shitting on him as Peter Parker to have it happen to Spider-Man instead. Speaking of which, at the party we see another 5 instances of Peter getting trashed by the movie. Fantastic. Thank you for showing me this, it enriches the film greatly. In this scene we see Harry's rage at the failure of Otto, Peter Parker's attempts to seduce MJ, and MJ's acceptance of another guy's marriage proposal. Peter fails to explain what happened to him on the night that he missed her show. He sure is terrible at saying that he almost got run over in the street by a getaway vehicle carrying 2 armed men. Then again, even if he did, I doubt MJ would care. She'd find some way to turn it against him. That's just how vindictive she is in regards to him missing her play. Look at this shit, she rubs even more salt in the wound by listing the people who have seen her show, as if the number of times they've seen it is directly linked to how much they care about her. The current boyfriend has seen it 5 times, and Harry twice, and apparently even Aunt May has seen it once. What the fuck, movie? In what timeline would Aunt May not have asked Peter to come with her? It starts at 8 PM in the middle of New York and she's a frail old lady. Did MJ organize for her transportation and the ticket? Did she drive her there personally? If so, why wouldn't she have invited Peter too? I literally can't even. Is she just making this up to fuck with him? Or did she strategically organize for Aunt May to come and see her alone so that she could use that as ammunition against Peter? Huh? She tells him that even her sick mother and alcoholic father came to see the show. Now you're just twisting the knife, MJ. The first one is at least understandable to bring up, but her dad? She uses this to slight Peter, despite the fact that her father is an abusive asshole and only showed up to ask for money from MJ. Which means he only got backstage through nepotism and probably didn't shell out $35 for a ticket. He had no intention of ever seeing her show, but she ranks this dude above Peter in her rhetoric. She ranks the guy who told her that she would never amount to anything and abused her and her mother over Peter in this situation. All for the goal of fucking with him because she can't have what she wants. Plus, all of this is only continuing because Peter can't articulate his perfectly legitimate excuse for not making it to her play, and for some reason he still can't. Because if he did, it would make MJ seem even more monstrous for refuting it, or they'd have to find a way for MJ to be mad at Peter, which, knowing how cunty she is, wouldn't be hard to come up with. She states that despite him caring about her so much, he still can't make an 8 o'clock curtain, and he's just an empty seat to her. Well, that's it for my man Peter. That's about as conclusive as possible for their chance at romance. Take the fucking L, my dude.
Day by day, he gazed upon her. Day by day, he sighed.
Oh no. Right after this, Harry starts ranting at Peter due to his uncanny connection to Spider-Man and slaps him. I get that he's angry about this whole situation, and that he's drunk. I just don't understand the continuation of their pseudo-relationship while he has so much pent-up anger. I mean, he physically attacks Peter. Damn, this dialogue stings.
Don't act like you're my friend. You stole MJ from me. You stole my father's love. And you let him die?
In the extended cut, when Harry walks over to this dresser at the start, he talks of Peter as a family member, which gives his character far more depth. But in this cut, he feels incredibly one-dimensional to me, which is a real shame. And to complete this tragic trifecta of unfortunate events, the love of Peter's life agrees to marry another man. Well, fuck, I guess that's a more conclusive action. Well, she's off the market now. If only Peter had taken a photo of his ruined bike and showed it to her, it wouldn't even require any words to fail. Peter dresses up as Spider-Man again and swings off, and his webs stop working again. This marks the third instance of his webs failing him at a non-specific moment. They also turn off for a decent couple of minutes, or like I said earlier, even longer if we presume that he had to walk home carrying this newspaper. Unlike the bank scene, this is at least tied to an underlying cause, despite that cause being ridiculous. We are treated to a short snippet of Ock as he constructs his second fusion reactor. Bigger, stronger, and more powerful than the last. How menacing! Except wait, what's going on here? Property of the US government? I'm sorry, what? There are two possibilities for him being in possession of these goods. He either purchased them via insanely sketchy underground means from a third party. Yes, he bought the materials to create a fucking sun generator. Yeah, and all with those 2 bags of gold coins and notes. You what, mate? This guy is a physicist and inventor. He was a loving husband concerned with the betterment of mankind and was highly respected by others in the field. He had to enter into an agreement with a legitimate company in order to make his life's work viable. He says himself he's not a criminal, as if it's unthinkable. The very idea of committing crime repulses him. There is no way he'd have specific underground contacts from which to buy these parts. Plus, it's not like the US government is willingly helping him either way, even secretly, or at least see some kind of contact or supervisor, or a single shred of government interference in the movie. But nope. The second way he could have obtained these parts? Well, by stealing them, of course. From where exactly? How would he know where their location is? They'd presumably reside within a government facility. How would he be able to infiltrate a secure government installation by himself to steal these parts? And if he somehow did, can you show me that, please? Which brings me to my next problem. Fucking logistics. How does this motherfucker get all of these crates into the building by himself without a transportation method? Yes, I can see the cranes. He'd still have to transport the parts from wherever they were prior to arriving at the dock and then somehow shift them via cranes. Cranes which we're not even sure are functional, and he's moving everything into this building. This fucking building. A building I can't even see him being able to get into, let alone these fucking crates. He's doing all of this as a wanted man. Even if he had people helping him, people we never see, someone would spot them carting all of these US government branded boxes this way and ask some questions. Surely fucking someone would have checked up on this. Maybe I'm giving these people too much credit. I mean, they're the people who couldn't even look up in the last movie. Currently, the only way he's able to finish this reactor and for the plot to make sense is by literally no one ever seeing or hearing this guy leaving or entering this building, which is kinda difficult considering there's a manhunt happening. Peter attempts to covertly explain that he's losing his Spider-Man powers, and his doctor tells him that uncertainty about his life is what's fueling this random power loss. As by this point, Peter isn't even sure why he's Spider-Man anymore. Peter, this is a doctor, a practitioner of medicine, not your psychiatrist. So they had this shot in, making this place the free college healthcare center or some shit. But Uvu, the shirt! Peter has an internal monologue with the ghost of Uncle Ben. Ben tells him that he wants him to be courageous and just, and that he trusts him to take those dreams out into the world. The dead uncle, who he is vindicating by being Spider-Man, is telling him to go and do just that. But Peter says he can't because he loves Mary Jane. You're kidding me, right? You're going to stop being Spider-Man because of a thought that barely cares about you anymore? What is your reasoning here, Peter? Did you read the script and figure out that you'll be A-okay? If anything, you should want to be Spider-Man even more now that MJ is out of your life and there's less of a chance that she'll be used as a bargaining chip. Like in every fucking movie. Did you only want to be Spider-Man for the duration that MJ was in danger of being used against you and simultaneously single? What? Let's go through the timeline and try and figure out what exactly is happening here. Peter is Spider-Man. He has been for a couple of years now. He likes seeing MJ, and by seeing her, I mean gawking at her advertisements. But he has made a promise to stay away from her because of the fact that she can be used against him by villains. At his birthday party, he makes a commitment to go and see her play, which he fails to keep, disappointing MJ, who he now wishes to be with and actively pursues her affection moving forward. Huh? What about your promise to... fuck it. But because of the fact another guy is with her, alongside him disappointing MJ, his powers start failing him. Which we now know is because of him being uncertain as a hero. Maybe. So he blames the Spider-Man part of his brain for this, and thus his powers subconsciously turn off. The, hooks grow back into his fingers, and his eyes get worse. Right. You'd think he'd only want them to turn off if he had gained her affection and had to choose between her and his duties as Spider-Man. But the whole situation is backwards. She's the furthest away from him she has ever been, and he relinquishes his powers as if he knows for a fact that he'll enter a relationship with MJ, despite her being engaged. I cannot fully comprehend the mess that is his reasoning. So, Peter gives up the mantle of Spider-Man. It's a powerful visual, an iconic shot. It's just a shame the reasoning behind him giving up his superhero persona feels so unearned, or it may have had an actual impact on me. Spider-Man is no more, and Peter's new daily life is detailed in a montage. He trips over nothing, then he gets up, twice. This montage shows what I consider a couple of weeks. His position in class has changed from being blasted by his lecturer and threatened with failure to being confidently looked upon for the correct answer and commended by the lecturer personally. He's fixed up his scooter. How the fuck is he fixed up his scooter? That thing was absolutely totaled. With what finances is he fixing it using? He was dead ass broke at the start of this movie. In debt, actually, with both the Daily Bugle and his landlord. Wait, fuck that. What money has he been paying his living expenses with? He hasn't received another job that we've seen since being fired from Joe's Pizza, and his main source of income, taking pictures of Spider-Man, can't be fulfilled. As other than his continued absence, there aren't any Spider-Man related events. Oh, you think that Peter has a stash of Spider-Man imagery just in case of such an event? Well, fuck you. May says this later.
You take Spider-Man's pictures, right?
Henry and I agree. We don't see his picture in the paper anymore.
Take that, asshole straw man. How has he not already been evicted by his rent-hungry landlord that bum rushes him every time he leaves his room? His only remaining relative can't afford to continue living in her own home, let alone help him pay for his rent and his university and his food and to help him fix up his fucking scooter. So how does any of this add up? It doesn't. I'd be more inclined to take this part of the movie at face value if it hadn't spent so much time to specifically set up that his finances were problematic. But it has, several times. Where's the payoff? There isn't one. Fuck you for paying attention. It was all just part and parcel of Peter being shat on, which already felt horribly mean-spirited and pointless. Woo! I'd also like to point out an issue I have with this part, not because it's problematic to the plot, but because I'm an asshole. Look at this fucking freeze frame. Could you not have gone back 4 or 5 frames and used these instead? Look at this fucking shit. Moving on. We cut to Peter watching MJ's play. Damn, he really sprung out $35 of that money he doesn't have to come and see this play? What a simp. MJ notices him, and the seasoned stage performer is so shocked that she stops dead in her tracks. Huh. This bodes well for the astronaut. What exactly is the point of this guy again? In the extended cut, we have a scene dedicated to how odd it is that MJ is agreeing to marry a guy that she doesn't seem interested in, which makes this plot point even more horrific. In fact, the extended cut has a lot of bullshit in it. It has the scene I just mentioned. It has this scene where Peter figures out using facts and logic that the reactor is bullshit, yet never tells Otto. And then this scene. This fucking scene. Poor John is a tool to be used and cast aside, and neither of these two seem to respect the fact that he's engaged to MJ. When did they start dating? Well, my guess is the day that MJ learned that there was a surprise party for Peter. Wicked girl. Peter then starts a normal-ish conversation with MJ. Who knew he was capable of such things? All it took was him being slapped and having his heart broken to communicate like a normal human being. Well, almost.
Punch me, I bleed.
But it's fine, the dumbass plot has accomplished what it wanted with Peter giving up as Spider-Man, so it's fine for him to act like a regular person now. He tries to talk her into a relationship with him and she refuses, due to being engaged, and leaves. Then he puts his glasses on. Why did he do that? Why weren't they on sooner? If he's trying to keep the fact that his vision is dulled a secret, then why is he wearing them everywhere else, including during her play? You'd think he'd keep them on so he doesn't fucking trip over again. The guy's practically blind without them on. The best chance you have of making it up to her probably doesn't involve you falling on your face, Peter. But his perfect vision comes back for half a minute because I seriously don't know, this is confusing enough already. Moving along, problematic characterization inbound. Earlier, Peter saw a police pursuit and ignored it to stuff his face, which is okay, he can't really do much about the crime anyway because of his lack of webs. But here, he sees a guy getting robbed in broad daylight, and Peter, the dude who has been living the last 2 years in pursuit of justice, barely gives a solitary fuck. His uncle died because he refused to give in to a robber's demand, which was the catalyst for Peter's heroic persona in the first place. To see this happening, and not only fail to instinctively help out, not only fail to call out for help from the people right fucking there, but to walk away with a perplexed look on his face and do nothing, feels antithetical to his character. Good old Peter, fuckboy Peter, tells Aunt May what really happened with the carjacker, and how Ben died for being the only person who did the right thing. Admittedly shocked, Aunt May steps away from the table and isolates herself upstairs. I feel this is a powerful scene that's executed well. Aunt May's reaction feels particularly poignant and it's well delivered, and it's reasonable that she'd feel this way based on how much she misses Ben.
Oh, what Ben? Wait, Oh my.
She probably repeated this story about his last days to herself over and over and misses him dearly. Great scene, honestly, top-notch stuff. Meanwhile, Doc Ock is adding the finishing touches to his reactor, and the entire building is conveniently clear of all packaging and debris. Now, I've already nailed this point into the core of the planet, so I'll skip over the fine details, but how? Ock muses that there is one final chore, and he sets his sights on the tritium needed for his reaction. He ambushes Harry in his apartment, and he attempts to source the tritium from him, and is told to fuck off. But after being dangled over the side of the rooftop, he says he'll make a deal. A deal? On one hand, there's nothing to stop Doc Ock from torturing the location of the tritium out of this dude. But that could cause some kind of scene, and likely result in him being even more exposed to the police, which barely matters anymore as the police have been useless the entire film, but hey, I'll treat the movie with respect. So instead he creates a deal involving the defeat of their mutual foe, to bring Spider-Man to him alive in exchange for the tritium. However, there is a slight problem. Spider-Man has gone AWOL and no one knows where he is. The solution? Peter Parker, the sycophantic friend of Spider-Man's, who will for suresies know his location. Oh, okay, so where is he? Where is Peter currently? How are you going to find this dude in a city with so many people? Are you going to ask Harry for his address or campus, or are you just going to leave? Okay. Anyway, Peter spots a newspaper with a graph showing that the crime rate is up 75%? Holy fuck, was Spider-Man that much of a limiting factor on crime? Is the police being useless just like canon in this universe? I get that he's quick, agile, and is effective at stopping crime, but 75%? That makes me even more confused as to his wants and needs. He stops being Spider-Man because a girl won't love him, not because he's failed as the symbol that causes crime rates to stay so low. Are you not harming the city and by proxy her by refusing to be a Spider-Man? Do you not remember her nearly being sexually assaulted in the first film, you nutrient-deficient carrot? Peter suddenly realizes that there is a burning building right next to him, and he strolls in it to save a child on the second floor. Yeah, this normal-ass dude walks into this blazing inferno, and there's somehow no problem with this. We can see that his superpowers are all but gone at this stage, and the movie wants you to know that with this drawn-out reaction. Yet he doesn't seem to mind the lack of oxygen inside this place. Not until he leaves, that is. He saves a kid, and I'd feel a twinge of pride for this guy if the parents' first thought upon their building catching on fire wasn't, "Quick, let's stuff our fucking child into the wardrobe and get out of here." However, someone was unfortunately trapped on the 4th floor and didn't make it out on time, which steals Peter's resolve on the journey to becoming Spider-Man again. Peter has an introspective moment, asking himself why he can't have what he wants. And the landlord's daughter gives him a piece of chocolate cake and a glass of milk. This is framed as a peerless moment of selflessness and a great upturn for Peter's fortunes. You know the main character is fucked when getting a piece of cake is the best thing that's happened to him in the entire film. The poor bastard. He gets a message from May. She forgives him and thanks him for telling the truth about Ben's murder, which feels genuinely touching. She speaks of heroism in all people, a quality that allows people to die with pride even if they need to be headstrong and give up the thing that they want most to be consistent, such as their dreams. I must say, these two scenes between these two are fantastic and are some of my favourite parts of the entire trilogy. This inspires courage in Peter, who climbs to the top of a building, attempting to recreate the iconic scene from the original. He says that he must have a strong focus on what he wants, which is what the Doctor told him in the extended cut. These words aren't spoken in the theatrical cut, meaning they're sourced from nowhere, which is odd, but he runs, jumping across the alleyway and yelling that he's back, but none of his powers activate. He grabs a clothesline and slaps against a wall before slamming down onto a car. Let's establish Peter's powers at this stage. Webs, gone. Eyesight, gone. Sticky fingers, gone. Super strength, gone. Spidey sense. We haven't seen anything that would activate it, but we can presume it's gone alongside all of his other powers. What does this fall do to him? Nothing. It hurts his back enough for him to stumble and hobble, but being slapped into a brick wall and bodied by this fall doesn't do enough damage to last into the next scene. Doesn't even break his glasses, they just warp into his hand and he stands back up. I guess the almighty tribunal of spider gods have looked into all 31 billion futures and determined that even though he's in potentially life-threatening danger here, he will survive. So they just won't switch his genes on. There shouldn't really be any issue here. His mental block makes no sense anymore. He has a strong focus on what he wants. He should have had one earlier. You know, when a dude was being fucking mugged right in front of his eyes, but specifically here, there's no reason why he shouldn't regain his powers. Though I do think the I'm back into my back is a pretty funny gag. Meanwhile, the astronaut, John, is discussing who they should invite to his wedding with MJ. She refuses to invite Peter. That's a little cold, don't you think? You called him one of your oldest friends in a prior scene, and even John wants to invite him. But she ignores him and then asks John to kiss her in the same way that Spider-Man did in the first film. But this doesn't satisfy her. In fact, it makes her hunger for Peter again, to truly confirm if the kiss she felt at the end of the last movie meant what she thought it did. Not that she shouldn't have known he was Spider-Man already, but sure. Yeah, so John's use to her has expired, and she doubles back on everything she's ever done that pushed Peter away. So in the very next scene, yes, the scene directly after she was talking about her wedding plans with her fiancé, and was specifically against inviting Peter due to him being a, quote, big jerk, unquote, she goes on a date with him. She says that her mind played a trick on her, and some part of her heard what he had to say. However, Peter is done with this shit and he patrols her hard.
Do you love me or not?
I don't.
So, that's it. Peter has gotten over his love of MJ, or more accurately, he has chosen Spider-Man over her. Except he hasn't, because he goes back on what he says later on anyway, enabling him to have his cake and eat it too. For fuck's sake.
Kiss me.
Kiss me? What? You're engaged? The wedding preparations were in the last fucking scene! And Peter literally just rejected you. I understand that you're attempting to find out if the dude is actually Spider-Man through the magic of kissing, but the boat has sailed without you at this stage. You're stroking the dude and expecting a kiss. What? How? Advancing the relationship with this guy was just a bit for Peter's affection. You're the lowest of the low, Mary Jane Watson. Anyway, before Peter can kiss her, a car comes flying through the window. Peter's spidey senses kick in. For reasons. Yeah, the dude whose powers fail at random times, for random reasons, and usually associated with the girl who is now giving him confusing as fuck signals, and has been established to be all but devoid of Spider-Man's enhancements, has his spider powers come back now because he and MJ would be dead otherwise. Fantastic. Again, I guess his genes did the math in these 4 scenes and determined that he wouldn't be killed if his powers weren't activated here. I'm glad his genetic code has such dramatic timing. Bravo. I'm not sure who would have done this though. It's kind of weird to introduce a second villain 2/3 of the way into the movie who wants to kill Peter Parker explicitly. It's not like it's Otto, because his plan is directly contingent on Peter being alive in order to gain the whereabouts of Spider-Man, or at the very least have him act as messenger, so, The two of them stand still in this blown out building that was just destroyed by a car flying through the window. Instead of, I don't know, running to safety like normal fucking people. And someone appears. Was Otto. What exactly are you doing, my dude? This is probably the least effective interrogation method I've ever seen. What exactly was your plan here? In what way exactly is throwing a car at the only person who can help you find Spider-Man a good idea? What exactly was he supposed to do if Peter died here? Go back to Harry and ask him if anyone else knew where Spider-Man was? Jesus Christ, how is this a rational move for him or the arms if it's the highest risk strategy possible? Successful fusion is their goal here. No part of this facilitates his goal. It's not even as if he knows Peter is Spider-Man, so for all intents and purposes, this is a normal guy to Ock. And he biffs a fucking car at him from behind. Whatever happened to walking up and talking with your target? Yeah, you did that earlier when you made the deal with Harry, you absolute buffoon. But back to our earlier question, how exactly did Ock know where to find Peter? While Harry didn't tell him anything about Peter's whereabouts, we can't rule out the possibility that he'd know where his apartment was, or at least the area in which he lives. He did have a long talk with him over dinner and could have mentioned it in passing, not that it was shown. However, there is one small problem with that. He doesn't find him at his apartment. He finds him while he's on a date with MJ, which could be anywhere in the city. And even if he initially spotted Peter exiting his apartment and stalked him through the city streets, his opening gambit isn't exactly one that I'd associate with premeditated interrogation. Plus, you'd think you'd try to limit the amount of time spent visible to the public, and this in no way facilitates this goal. Ox states that he'll peel the flesh off MJ's bones if he doesn't find Spider-Man? Gee shit, the dude's really lost it. Must be all that, arrogance. He throws Peter against a wall with enough power to shatter the bricks behind him and collapse the ceiling on top of him. Yeah, the building's destabilized, but I mean, that's a fucking throw. This is his messenger, the only link he knows in all of Manhattan to Spider-Man's whereabouts. And instead of bonking him and kidnapping him while he's unconscious, he uses a method that would probably kill a person. Otto leaves with MJ as his hostage. There's a little bit of wonky CGI, a little bit. And this, dear folks, makes Peter regain all of his powers. Yes, this event is what makes him regain his webs, his spider sense, his sticky fingers, his super strength, and every other power that's associated with Spider-Man. It's what drives him to become that hero again. Are you kidding me? Again, he was a symbol of hope and justice for 2 years without MJ ever entering the picture outside of advertisements. But as soon as they're in contact and she's negging his ass, Spidey can't get it up anymore? The dude should be a hardened, seasoned beast by now. This makes no fucking sense. He saw 2 events that started to sway him back into the heroic life, and then a third that forced his hand, causing him to run into a burning building to save someone's life. At that point, he was practically a hero again, and he tested himself. But his genes said no. Why exactly? If he can turn all of his powers off by not wanting to be a hero anymore, then why can't he turn them back on by wanting to be a hero? Let's go back. What exactly is the source of his powers? Well, a spider bite that rebuilt his genetic code. Why do they fail? Well, they shouldn't, but the movie posits that they only fail because of his mental state. What specifically about his mental state? Well, the fact that he can't love MJ anymore, as his obligation of being Spider-Man caused him to lose her to some other guy. I mean, you were scraping it pretty close with only 5 minutes left here, so you should really blame your time management, but sure. But when MJ is captured, that unlocks his powers. Yes, a literal damsel in distress trope replenishes his powers. Wow. Peter clenches his fist and looks determined to stop Ock. But he needs his PJs first. He can't stop Ock here, even though he has his powers and Ock is literally right in front of him. So he instead steals his outfit back and meets him on a tower. Man, Peter is really concerned about anyone finding out who he is. It's as if the movie is setting up that there will be major repercussions that outweigh these people potentially dying for this to happen. Luckily enough, for anyone looking for Ock, the guy hasn't changed his clothes since the bank scene. I guess he couldn't get his coat off now that it's full of arms. So he's just been walking around with these puppies out in the open. If he has another solution to this, we don't see it. The next we see of him, he's just climbing a building with nary a police car in sight, after taking a screaming woman across town in his tentacle arm, all the way to his lair and chaining her up. There wasn't a single passerby that called for help or the police or followed this target of an active manhunt to his lair. No one at all. Not a single fucking person. Jesus, at the very least, show him bonking her unconscious. This is insulting. At last, we have the famous train scene. I've seen a lot of praise of this scene from a lot of people, but there are a lot of problems here. We start with a bout of close quarters fighting, Ock being punched in the face without any discernible effect again. It's just as problematic as the earlier scene, error carried forward if you will. He then throws the clock's hand at Spidey, which is flung straight back. He then splits the clock hand in half and throws both pieces back at Spider-Man. Damn, these are massive pieces of metal that are cascading back to street level and could very easily injure or kill someone. What does Spidey do about them? Nothing. Rip whomever was in that taxi. There's also some weird perspective-based combat in this scene. The tower seems to stretch and contract whenever the fuck it wants. Ock's arms can strike Spider-Man despite him being all the way down here, and Spidey can whip him near instantaneously from here. It's more a personal issue than a criticism. I just thought I'd point that out. Then we cut to my favorite shot in the entire film. I just think that this speaks for itself. It's just... whoa boy. Just gonna say, for a movie from 2004, I think the CGI holds up quite marvelously. Other than a couple of goofy instances, it's really solid for a movie that old. Props to the department. They fall onto a train, continuing the brawl as it moves forward. They land quite close to the front of it. Does anyone driving the train give a fuck about the dent and accompanying noise and investigate the disturbance, potentially stopping the train? No. Moving on, it's somewhat of a miracle that Otto can duck down under this bridge when he's facing the complete wrong way. The dude should have been clobberized. And yes, I realize he can jack into the arms and discern what they're seeing by using the cameras inside of them, but 2 of them are impaled inside the train and the other 2 are swinging at him. Good luck timing this shit. Ock throws Spider-Man through this bridge and then somehow exceeds the velocity Spidey is traveling at to end up on the other side of the bridge in prime position to be ganked? Otto, you just threw the dude. Did your brain reboot? Why are you standing here looking the other way as if Spider-Man suddenly stopped existing? You look genuinely shocked, as if he's just appeared out of thin air. How were you even ahead of him to begin with? Did you throw the train too? If you thought Spider-Man was already dead or knocked out, you'd go back and get the body, right? What eldritch knowledge does he have that I do not? They continue to fight, and the train whizzes past a station. Yeah, this is a full station of people, and from what we can see, a packed train. This train should have stopped. Seriously? Not one person wanted to get on or off at this stop? As far as the conductor knows, this is a fully operational train with not a problem in the slightest. Not one person at this station wanted to gain access to this particular train? Are you fucking kidding me? What are they all lined up for then? Then the train goes past another station after this. There's not a chance in hell no one would want to leave or enter it. You fucking know the people on the train would be hammering that stop button or informing the front cabin, but the driver just continues. Because if the train stopped here, the entire scene would fall apart. Peter fights Otto, with him failing to use the sword in his arm yet again, and saves 2 people while the train continues to move forward. This train operates as if no one is driving it up until this frame here. It missed 2 stations and didn't look like it was slowing down for the 3rd one. This man does not give a fuck. He does not care about the carriages being broken and smashed up. He does not care about the refugee train riders from those other carriages. He does not care about all of the people that should be screaming to be let off, or to slow down, or literally anything else at all, because it's a set piece. How the train is controlled only becomes important when the main characters get involved. It's ridiculous. Otto reaches his arm inside and pushes the accelerator all the way up, ripping it out. Oh great, now that they've invented a conductor, they have to invent a reason why he can't stop the train. Ha ha ha! This move somehow burns out the brakes. The brakes in general, or the brakes on this end of the train. This thing has to go the other way after bouncing off the stopper, right? There'd be another control room on the other side of the train, with separate brake controls and perhaps an emergency brake? But it's cool. The dude says he can't stop it. And I'm inclined to agree with him, considering he never stopped for anything else. Maybe it was his last day on the job and he wanted to murder everyone. On a side note, they do add a cool little Easter egg before this scene. In the transition between this scene and the clock tower conundrum, there is a story about the aging subway lines and their dodginess. I think it's brilliant considering what happens next. Kudos for including this. Spidey's mask is singed by the control board's explosion and he takes it off, realizing that at the rate they're traveling, they'll fly off the other end of the track. I still think this is an awesome shot and it really sets the stakes and tension of the scene. Good job on the CG. He attempts to stop the train several times, eventually succeeding by attaching webs to the walls and using the strength of his own body to stop it. It still contains enough energy to obliterate the stopper in one of the CG shots I'd say didn't age the best. Either way, he stops it, passing out from the exertion and is carried inside. Man, it sure is lucky for Peter that this wasn't set a decade later or his face would be all over the interwebs. I don't understand the narrative reasoning or motivation behind unmasking him here. They cause an explosion, rendering his mask unusable, so he removes it, revealing his identity, the identity he cherished enough to leave a room full of people with a madman, a room full of people with a madman, and his childhood love with a madman who just threatened to peel off her skin, all in order to stay anonymous. What repercussions are there for him revealing his face here? There are none. The entire train turns a blind eye, and 2 kids say that no one on the train will leak his identity. Then they give his mask back because the writers realized that he needs it for the climax, despite him not having any time to fix it, and them finding it. Finding it where exactly? It's just gone between these 2 cuts, so who knows. Sure is lucky that someone didn't just pocket it and put it on eBay. I'm more concerned as to why they're remaining on this train carriage despite it hanging meters in the air above the road. These guys will all die if this carriage falls, and no one seems even slightly rattled at the situation. Then Ock comes in, wreaking havoc, somehow not disrupting the train's precarious perch. He then transports Spider-Man to Harry all wrapped up in wire and yoinks the tritium, which is in a safe in the wall, and hidden behind a painting. That's so Harry. Spidey tells Harry that Ock is rebuilding the machine, and when it's activated, MJ will die along with half of New York? Okay? How do you know this exactly? It's not like this movie had a scene about it. In this version, he just knows the machine won't work as a reactor, and it will kill the city. What actually is Doc Ock's plan after he finishes with this? I get that the Arms have presented this plan to him as an alternative to ending himself. Is he just going to yeet himself into the ocean after all of this is done? Has he ever put an ounce of thought into what he's going to do after this? You would think if the Arms were fully in control, then they wouldn't have to persuade him in the first place to A, recreate the project, and B, reject his entire moral code in order to commit crime. They'd just jack into his brain and go from there, as Otto's explanation of the chip details. So he must have put some thought into this. What's he going to do after the reactor's completed? Present it to the city as a bank robber, murderer, and kidnapper and go, hey look, I fixed your energy problems? Or is he doomed to a repeating cycle of destruction and rebirth, continually rebuilding his doomed project in order to fuel the sanity-clawing demands of his AI abominations? Well, we can assume that he had to do a lot more work than simply using the resize tool in Paint to make his reactor bigger. Not only is he using different parts, there had to be some calculative work and design changes to the machine in order to account for both the different materials and the overall size. So you'd think it just fixed whatever fucking problem it was that prevented it from working in the first place before turning it on, but nope, it's fucked! Harry gets mad that Peter killed his father, and Peter says that there are bigger things happening than me and you. So there are 2 schools of thought here. First, Peter, just tell Harry what happened, just tell him that his dad was Gobby and that he impaled himself on his glider, and all of this is a big misunderstanding. The other school is... Norman's words were, "Don't tell Harry," and he's been pretty stringent with keeping that information to himself. He has kept the true circumstances of Ben's death to himself for that long also. He also wants Harry to be as lucid as possible to extract the location of Oxlair from him, so telling him that he was the reason his father died after the guy almost stabbed him sounds counterproductive. Spider-Man lurks in the shadows of Oxlair as he looks down upon the new reactor. Yeah, but how though? How did he get here? How would he know where Ock's base of operations is? The entirety of New York failed to find this place for weeks despite an active manhunt happening. And Harry never once asked or was told where this was. What reason would Ock even have to tell him where it was located either? The magic coordinates are just singed into Spidey's brain by the script so that he can save the day on time. Speaking of singed shit, how is Spidey's mask holding up? Oh yeah, he has a new one now. Spider-Man lets Ock start the reaction. Despite having the element of surprise, knowing these things are incredibly hard to stop once the reaction is started, and knowing how dangerous it is. Despite the fact that he could probably talk him out of it or at least prevent it from activating, he just crawls around up here. You would rather just chill up there than prevent the reaction you know will kill half of New York, and once started needs to be controlled by the very person you seek to restrain. Why? You cunt popsicle. Spider-Man attempts to stop the reaction and they do battle for one last time. Spidey javelins him and Otto gets the shit beaten out of him in the water. And the arms, they just don't help out. They could, but nah, they just don't. They just let Spidey beat the fuck out of Otto, and I mean beat the fuck out of Otto. God damn, this dude should be pulp. He prevents MJ from being sucked into the sun by these iron shackles around her legs. Well, at least this time the murder weapon is actually magnetic, but he is given the big whack by Otto, who is perfectly fine. This final punch was Spidey's last-ditch effort to put him down before saving MJ. Look how fucking solid this punch is. Dude should be fucking dead. They try to show MJ doing something at the very last minute. There probably should be some dialogue to fill this gap. Him holding up Spidey like this is either the worst bait or the worst attempt at murdering someone, either of which is problematic. Ock tries to stab Spidey with that sword. You know the one. This is only the second instance in which we see him try to use this thing. But unfortunately for him, he stabs the wire powering the reactor. Yeah, the dude piped electrical wiring into this building some fucking how. What exactly is this running to or from? This thing is producing probably a lot more power than the original reactor at this stage, and he takes a lot of it, flying across the goddamn room when he finishes. And look, I can understand him surviving the initial zap, if only because he needs to be alive for the movie to happen, and that he was shocked by one of these flares and in the back, rather than being directly jacked into the power. But twice? With the second instance including the fact that the dude is drenched in seawater? Mofo is a walking conductor, he should be fried, but nope. He's still alive after this voltage literally rockets him across the room and his arms go out of commission. I guess that's the secret to surviving death in this universe. So the building starts selectively destroying itself as the magnetic pull exceeds the limits of the dock and begins pulling shit from the city's edge towards it. Once again, great fucking spot for a reactor. Good job. The AI shuts off, knocking the gremlin personality out of him. He has a nice little speech as he recognizes Peter, who repeats Aunt May's wise words, that sometimes people have to throw away their dreams in order to be heroic. Ock laments his actions, agreeing that intelligence is a privilege, not a gift, which is the opposite of what he originally said. This is not an instance you'd want to fail in regards to continuity, especially considering the original quote was said by someone who actually lived by the correct version of those principles and mysteriously died around the 20-minute mark. Regardless, he's swayed and he reveals that it cannot be stopped, but he can drown the sun in the river. Yes, a literal sun that has become self-sustaining, can generate thousands of megawatts, and can vaporize solid matter can be drowned by 1x Puddly Boy. Alright. The Mad Lad starts ripping up the base of this thing, which is probably made of steel. Thing should have been the first thing to go, but it wasn't. He says that he will not die a monster, and then he drowns the sun and himself. Peter tells MJ that he lied when he said he didn't love her anymore. Aha! Learn from the best, I see. He tells her what he meant to tell her on the phone earlier, how he just can't bear the risk if his enemies were ever to find out who he was. Yeah, this is the nail in the coffin right here. No more chance of a relationship. She knows the secret. For her to try and be with him would be pointless now. It would be selfish and against his wishes as the city's protector. She should just trot on back to her fiancé and get married. She should be thrilled to get back to him. But, damn, she doesn't give a single fuck that she's back with him. Isn't it amazing that the police could finally find this place conveniently at the end of the film, and only after being pointed towards it by the wake of destruction a giant fucking sun caused? Spidey webs off and she cries. Not because she was reunited with the fiancé that searched frantically for her around the dock. No, simply for Spider-Man. For Peter. Now that she's got that spider dick in her sights, it's practically over for John. Harry has a conversation with one of the best characters in all three of the movies, and finds the lair of the Green Goblin. Considering this reveal, Harry should almost immediately understand what happened in the last film and have a chat with Peter, or at the very least comprehend his situation, as Spider-Man clearly didn't murder his father in cold blood. But I guess it's open for interpretation. I guess we'll see what he does with this information in the next film. It's wedding day for MJ and she is absolutely thrilled to be there. Now, I don't know how long she had to call this wedding off. They'd only just sent invitations in this scene, so it could be weeks later. But she has made up her mind already. This isn't no last minute ditch during the wedding vows, this shit is premeditated. She even writes him a note and everything. So why in the fuck of all that is holy did she not call off the wedding, or have a chat with John about her feelings? She just let this wedding commence, wasting a whole room of people's time, money, and energy. All of JJJ's torment to help organize this wedding. You big meanie, you're directly responsible for him being nerfed so hard in the next film, and I hate you for it. She runs into Peter's apartment in her wedding dress and attempts to win his love.
I've always been standing in your doorway.
I've always been standing in your doorway? Are you kidding? Unless you meant the doorway to the stairway to heaven's gates, you've spent the entire movie doing exactly zero of that. You told him to go and fuck himself. Then you purposely used the astronaut as literal bait, toyed with his feelings, told him to go fuck himself, and upon realization that John wasn't what you wanted, you turned 180 degrees and tried to seduce Peter. You were told the very reason why you couldn't be together and you still fucking ditched him at the altar.
Can't you respect me enough to let me make my own decision?
All of this bullshit and she's telling him to respect her decision?
Isn't it about time somebody saved your life?
You were the direct cause of him almost dying 4 times! Okay, so what do I think? While the CG holds up in most places and the music is fantastic, a personal favourite of mine being Spidey's theme, the quality of the writing brings down the movie in my eyes. If you aren't like me and derive your enjoyment of a movie from aspects such as the visuals, set pieces, and character dynamics, you'll probably have a lot of fun with this movie, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying it as is. I can slap this movie on any day and have fun. It is for that same reason that I don't delve into the quality of the editing or camera work and mostly stay away from visuals in my analysis. I'm focused on the writing as it's what matters to me and it's what I have experience with. I'm no more correct than you in my opinion of the film. Feel free to discuss any inconsistencies in my analysis in the comments or give your own reasons as to why you love it, and I'll try my best to get back to you. The whole trilogy of movies is worth watching. The third in particular is a personal favourite of mine despite it making even less sense than this one. They do have their writing issues, but I find them entertaining all the same. Again, thank you to all 3 of you that made it this far. I appreciate your viewership greatly, and I look forward to seeing you next time.